Hi, and welcome to this special edition of Loving the Planets on Compatibility. And this time we're looking at Taurus with all of the different signs. I'm Armand Diaz in New York.
And I'm Margaret Gray in Dublin, and today we're looking at the things that work for Taurus with the different signs and the things that may be a little more challenging.
All right, now this is from the perspective of Taurus. So it's a little bit different. If we talk about, say, Taurus and Aries, it's different than when we talked about Aries and Taurus, different perspectives. Well, and let's start with Taurus and Aries. Taurus is a sign that has a certain degree of earthiness, solidity is the word I'm looking for. And I think that the most positive thing that comes with a relationship with Aries is that Aries can bring a little extra fire, enthusiasm, and excitement. And, people with Taurus sun often have planets in Aries because Venus and Mercury never get that far away. So there's a good chance that there are planets in Aries, and those would get excited. And I think that that's one of the real positives. These are two of the first two signs of the zodiac also. And I feel that is, they share a little bit of that sort of outgoing, exciting energy of things sort of starting up. Although Taurus is a fixed sign, and Taurus tends to go a little slow for the lightning fast energy of Aries.
So true. And Taurus with Taurus, I mean, that's an interesting combination because although I've seen the opposite where Scorpio with Scorpio can get on very well, I haven't seen many couples with Taurus and Taurus together. I think two earth signs can both be a little too earthy in a way. It's like it almost get a little stuck maybe. However, there is of course the fact that they would understand each other very well. We're talking about sun signs here. We're not talking of course about the other planets. There could be a mutual understanding, but I think there mightn't be enough zing to get things going. But very good friendships with Taurus though.
Maybe there are a lot of Taurus with Taurus couples, Margaret. They just never leave the house, so we don't see them.
So true, yes.
Taurus with Gemini. I don't know how you feel about this. I feel that I think that Gemini, with its more sociable energy, it's a little bit more go out and explore this thing and that thing, can work really well with Taurus. They're the signs that are right next to each other often have a kind of opposite energy in some ways, and that's certainly true of Taurus and Gemini. But I think that somehow it's the same sort of, Gemini is a little bit more out there, a little bit more sociable, but not quite as determined about it as Aries. And I think maybe it's a little easier for Taurus.
It could be. I think the one thing with Taurus and Gemini, though, is that the Gemini energy may feel a little scattered to the Taurus. Taurus likes things to be a little more steady. So that might be where, there's a need to build a bridge. And of course, we're not saying any signs are incompatible. We're just saying what needs to be worked at to make them more compatible. And Taurus and Cancer, I mean, that's a very common combination and can work very well because there's a sense of kind of both really liking things to be fairly stable and steady and continuous. I've certainly seen a lot of friendships between Taurus and Cancer. Again, it's whether there's enough zing to get it going in terms of a sexual relationship, an intimate relationship, but it can work quite well because both can be kind of fairly home-centered and practical. And of course, both have that creativity to them. I mean, Taurus is an incredibly creative sign, and so is Cancer. So that's a great commonality.
Very, very true. I think that it is a combination that works really well together. Those are two signs where the moon, for example, gets along very well in both of those signs. And that really speaks to the compatibility, especially for like building up a home life. Now, Taurus and Leo. Here we have there's a real resonance on some levels, for things to be nice, for them to be regal, for them to be comfortable. Both signs really like that. Both signs, however, are fixed, and the differences come out in a rather sharp way. And I think this is one of the things that's a little beyond our scope here, but I think that it depends what part of the sign you're in. I think that later in each sign there gets to be a little bit more contrast, whereas earlier in the sign there's a little bit more flexibility. But there's certainly some differences there. Leo is a fire sign, and it's a fixed sign, but it's a little faster moving than Taurus, and it's not the most patient sign in the world. And I think there's a little bit of a conflict there with Taurus.
And also, of course, Taurus is so security oriented, which is much more than, Leo wants adventure. And I think that's what the fire signs. Now, moving on to Taurus and Virgo, that's an interesting combination. I have seen that in couples, but I have seen sometimes, and this, of course, not with all couples, that sometimes they almost get too comfortable together. So there isn't enough really difference to kind of motivate them. And of course, Taurus likes a lot of comfort. Virgo isn't necessarily about comfort. Virgo is about being of service. So there's a basic foundational difference there that, of course, again, can be bridged and can be very creative. But whereas Taurus likes the security, the luxury, whatever, Virgo is always doing something and doing something that really is about other people. So that's where I think there's some differences in those two earth signs, but fabulous friendships.
Yeah, I agree very much that it can be a little bit of a conflict there. Virgo doesn't necessarily appreciate the comfort orientation of Taurus, and Taurus doesn't really wants things to be nice, but not necessarily Virgoan. Virgo can be a little Spartan sometimes. There'll be a little bit of a conflict. Now, Libra is the other sign that Venus rules, so we would expect that Taurus and Libra would get along so well. What do you say, Margaret?
I don't know, because again, earth and air are quite different. And I think there's a kind of, like Gemini, Libra has this wonderful quality of being able to really multitask, multi-think is really a good description. And of course, it's very civilized, which Taurus likes, because Taurus likes keeping things civilized. But however, it's a very social sign, and it really is, that beautiful social butterfly, which is very different to Taurus, that likes to know how do things stand and doesn't want constant changeability, which Libra does need. Libra needs that flexibility and changeability. So I think, like all signs, they can work very well, but there needs to be a little bit of a bridge of understanding, so that Taurus can be a little possessive at times, and Libra really wants its freedom. So I think as long as there's an understanding where Taurus can allow Libra to go and do their thing, then it can work pretty well.
I think too, Taurus is one of, being the second sign of the zodiac, it is one of those that is very much about self. And Libra, being the start of the second half of the zodiac, is very much about other. So, from a Taurus perspective, that could work nicely, although there are some challenges in there. Now you talk about challenges, Taurus and Scorpio.
That's a fascinating one. I have seen that in many combinations, actually. It can be extremely passionate. I mean, the depth scorpionic energy with the sensuality of Taurus can really work. I think one of the challenges to get over, and again, a bridge is literally needed here, is that Taurus, is the bull in the field, wants to stay above the surface, wants to be involved in earthy, mundane life, and doesn't want to get pulled into the underworld of depth emotions. And of course, Scorpio inhabits that realm. And so, if Taurus allows itself to go to those places, I think it can be an incredibly passionate combination. But if it resists that, then it can be very distressing for the Scorpio. And then, there can be a challenge. But I think potentially, I think there's, a lot of possibilities for those two signs, really.
I think from the perspective of Taurus, Scorpio is fascinating. But, sometimes you just want to chill out, and fascinating isn't necessarily the thing right at that moment. So there is the need for balance. I also have seen a lot of this combination, and there tends to be a great deal of passion and a great deal of excitement, and a fair amount of misunderstandings about things. I'm exactly the way that you've talked about it. Now, Taurus and Sagittarius. We're talking about two signs that don't share a lot in common. Sagittarius is a mutable fire sign, and Taurus is a fixed earth sign. We're going to have a combination here that is going to challenge the perspective of both parties. And let's remember that this is the sun, so this isn't the, necessarily the everyday type of thing. This is the pattern that emerges over time. This is some of the challenges that you see over time, and some of the opportunities that you see over time. And I think Sagittarius can be, from the perspective of Taurus, can be another sign that is very exciting, very different, looking for, it's a big picture sign. It's very mutable. Sagittarius is very mutable, very changeable, and for Taurus that can be both. That's a fascination, but I think sometimes the changeability of Sagittarius is the challenge for Taurus. You don't seem to be the person you were yesterday or last week,
and also the amount of freedom Sag wants, rather than to be tied to something, whereas Taurus likes to be anchored in something solid. So, and Sag can take a lot more risks, and Taurus likes security and financial security and all those kind of things, and Sag as a sign can be very expansive and the gambler in terms of taking chances. Okay, Capricorn, what do you reckon about Taurus and Capricorn?
No, I mean, they're two earth signs. They're compatible in that sense. I feel that there's very little challenge in this combination, out of the box, and when we look at moons and Venuses and Mercuries and something like that, I'm sure there are going to be challenges. But I think, maybe Taurus has a little bit more of that kind of in the moment sensual energy, whereas Capricorn is going someplace. And that's maybe the challenge, but really, I think that, from the Taurus perspective, I think Capricorn can very much serve the need for resources and so on. We're about earthy stuff.
It could be. The only thing I would say is that it could get a little kind of almost earthy, a little muddy, kind of, entrenched in that. And also there could be a little bit of competition who's in charge, because Capricorn likes to be in charge and Taurus really can dig its heels in and doesn't really want to be told what to do. So I think, again, that can be a little frustrating, that can come up. But flying right into Aquarius, now Taurus and Aquarius is such an interesting combination because they're really very, very different energies. And, Aquarius has this huge wide perspective and Taurus is much more somewhat tunnel visioned in terms of, setting a goal and going for it and working very hard to achieve it. And I think in relationships, it's almost like the Aquarian perspective may feel a little big for Taurus. So it's whether it can kind of adjust to that. On the other hand, I think there can be, again, these elements that are different, earth and air, there can be an attraction to the difference.
I think that, there's certainly a possibility there's going to be a lot of attraction there because that airiness, that intellectualness of Aquarius is very exciting for Taurus. However, Aquarius looks big picture, very principled. Right? The principle is what matters. And Taurus is looking for the concrete reality. And there could be some challenges there for sure.
And also, just, sorry, before we get on to Pisces, just to say that also, I wonder if the sensuality of Taurus, that those needs get met with Aquarius. And of course, we're generalizing here, not looking at the whole chart, but Aquarius needs to have a wider picture. And so it's less tactile. And I think Taurus might miss out on that. Sorry, you were about to launch into Taurus and Pisces.
I was about to launch into it, but take it.
Oh, thank you. All mine. Taurus and Pisces, I think, can be a very gentle combination, actually, because I think there can be so much empathy on the side of Pisces and an understanding of the Taurian fears at times and so on, that I think that can certainly work very well. I think also, there's that affection on the Pisces side that can meet the sensuality of the Taurus. So I think it is a really good combination. I think at times the frustrating bit, or the bits that might be more challenging, are that Pisces can feel as if they're in dreamland and not come down to earth, and Taurus can get a little frustrated with how about, you know, daily life? You know, there's no food in the fridge and you're meditating 20 hours a day, you know. So those kind of things might be a little challenging, just to be aware of them, you know, that consider that.
Pisces, you know, Pisces can go either way, though. You know, the fish swim in two directions, and Pisces can be rather material, and I think that it can be a very sweet combination from the perspective of Taurus to have that kind of, you know, like whatever it is, we're going to do more of it. And doing more of it, we will start talking about Gemini next time.
Fabulous. See you next time. Bye, Armand.